What's going on, everyone? You're back with your boy Jono for another quick math lesson. Today we're going to have a look at an introduction to equations, how to solve them and how to set out our working to ensure that we get full marks every single time we attempt one of these questions. So when we're talking about an equation, it's different to an algebraic expression. In previous lessons we've seen quite a lot of algebraic terms, but an equation always has an equal sign in it. It's actually part of why it's called an equation. Equal and equation have the same start. So we know that every time we see an equal sign, we're definitely dealing with an equation. What these equations are going to have is a variable that we don't know the answer to. It's going to be a letter, X or A or whatever. The thing that we're trying to do is work backwards to find out the kind of code that makes the whole mathematical sentence make sense. It has to equal the other side. That's what the equal sign means. Because of this, we actually have all the information just in this definition of what we need to do. We have to work backwards in order to find this answer, right? We're trying to unravel that code, but we've got to make sure the entire time that we're working, everything stays equal. If we take away 3 from one side, for example, now my equal sign doesn't make any sense because these two things aren't exactly the same. So every time we do something, we have to do it to both sides of that equation just to make sure the equal sign remains in balance. So in your mind, when you're trying to work these questions out, what's my next step? I just want you to think backwards and equal every single time. If you've got these two concepts down, I guarantee you're going to find these equations pretty easy to deal with. So in this one-step equation that we're going to see to start off, we've got x plus 8 is equal to 10. We want to work backwards to find out the code that makes this mathematical sentence correct. For these one-step equations, you can usually just kind of see straight away. You could just guess, oh yeah, it's probably 2, and you'd get the answer correct. But we need to learn the fundamentals on these one-step equations so we can progress into harder questions. So all we have to do is work backwards away from that letter and then do the same thing to both sides. Backwards and equal every time. Because this is x plus 8, I've got to work that back. So I'm doing the exact opposite of plus 8 and I'm doing minus 8. That's the backwards part of our step. We've also got to make sure that this thing stays equal. So if I minus 8 from one side, I have to minus 8 from the other side. Now I've got x is equal to 2. That's the answer we thought we were going to get. And this just shows a scaffold of how we got there. Here's another example of a one-step equation. I've got x divided by 3 is equal to minus 2. These kind of questions are a little bit harder to just see the answer straight away. So we're definitely going to have to use our scaffold, our backwards and equal, to get this one right. So because I've got x is divided by 3, I have to undo that divided by 3. This just means doing the exact opposite operation. So instead of divided by 3, I have to multiply this side by 3. And because I'm doing backwards and equal, I have to times the other side by 3 as well. Because I've done x divided by 3 times by 3, the two 3's cancel each other out, so I'm just left with the letter. That's what I want, the answer to the code. Now I've got x is equal to, making sure that I did multiply it by 3, x is equal to negative 6, and that's my final answer. So if the backwards and equal doesn't work for you, another way to think about it is we're just looking for the thing that's furthest away from our letter on our side of the equal sign, and then we're just doing the opposite operation to both sides every single time. If you're on top of that, plus and minus are opposites, times and divides are opposites, you're going to find this topic easy to deal with. So if we have a look at a two-step equation, nothing actually changes. We're just doing the same steps that we saw in those one-step equations, but we've got to do them twice. So for this one, I've got 6x minus 2 is equal to 10. And I actually want to write out what this is saying. I've got 6 multiplied by x minus 2 is equal to 10. Because I've got to work backwards, I just have to take the thing that's furthest away from my letter and deal with that first. Because I've got that minus 2 there, I've got to get rid of it by doing the opposite operation. So I need to plus 2. But remember, both sides have to be equal the whole way through, so I have to plus 2 to both sides. Now I'm just left with 6x is equal to 12. We're not done here though. I need to find the letter by itself. It has to be by itself. But this is just another one-step equation. I've got 6 times x is equal to 12. The opposite of 6 times is 6 divide, so I've got to do that to both sides. The two 6's cancel each other out, and I'm left with x is equal to 2. So the big pro tip for this, if you can identify what's furthest away from the variable at every step, you're going to do this right every single time. Once you have identified what's furthest away, all you have to do is the opposite operation and then rewrite your equation with that thing being taken care of. If you don't do it in 2 steps for a 2-step equation, you're going to find it really difficult and you'll probably lose marks for working. So please just go slow and just treat it like a whole bunch of 1-step equations over and over again. My second big pro tip is please use a separate color for your operations. We know that we're doing the opposite operation every time and on both sides. You can see in all of my example, I've used a red pen underneath, and that really shows me that I can't get lost because I know that that's not my actual answer. I'm just doing the opposite thing to both sides. The other thing that's really important here is that I'm trying to keep everything in a column as well. Sometimes students do a +2 in the wrong spot because they've just kind of thrown it all together in the line underneath. If you can try really hard to keep your things in the same column the whole way down, I guarantee you're not going to get confused as you go through these questions. So for this question here, I've got x plus 5 is all divided by 7, and that's equal to 3. The first thing I've got to do is identify what's furthest away. I've got to work backwards. Well, the 7 is way further away than the 5, so that's what I'm going to deal with first. Because it's divided by 7, I actually have to times by 7 to get rid of it. I'm doing times 7 on one side, so to keep this thing equal, I have to times 7 on the other side, and now I'm left with x plus 5 is equal to 21. Remember that the 7s cancelled each other out. One of the most important steps here is rewriting it again, so I've got x plus 5 is equal to 21. I've got to work backwards to get rid of that plus 5, so I just have to do minus 5. Making sure I do it on both sides, I'm just left with x is equal to 16, and I'm done. And now we've got a 3-step equation, and it looks a little bit harder, but if you're just looking at this as a series of 1-step equations, there's nothing new in this at all. I've got 3 plus 4p divided by 5 is equal to 11. The 3 is the furthest away from my letter. I like to think as the 2 dividers as they're like in the same building, and the 3 is in a whole different building. So that's way further away. Because I just have 3 of these things, to get rid of those 3 things, I need to take 3 from both sides. Once I've done that, I'm just left with 4p divided by 5, and that's equal to 8. The 4p are super close together, and the 5's a little bit further away, so I've got to do the opposite operation. Because it's divided by 5, I just have to times it by 5 to get rid of it, and I have to do that on both sides. So 4p is equal to 40. Again, making sure that you're staying in those columns is incredibly important because it'll just make sure that you can't times the wrong thing by 5. Now I've got 4p is equal to 40, 4 times p. To get rid of that 4, I have to do the opposite operation, which is just divided by 4. Making sure I do it to both sides, I'm left with p is equal to 10, and that's my final answer. So this is a 3-step equation. This will get you 3 marks in a test, and we're just doing the same skill over and over again. Just making sure that we're rewriting it every time will get you those full marks, and it'll satisfy all the working out that you need to do. I do hope you found this lesson helpful, and I'll see you later.